In this lesson, we'll take a look at how to paint a piece of candy with oil paints. We'll start with a primed canvas, and this is a small canvas. I'm working on a 7" by 5" surface, and I have primed it with a mixture of raw umber and titanium white. I used acrylic paint for the priming process. This provides us with a nice toned surface to work on. It's a little bit more difficult to build up relationships between colors and values when working on a stark white canvas, so it's always a good idea to have some bit of tone or value on the surface initially. Now, once we've got the primed surface in place, of course we can start sketching out the subject, and this is a relatively simple subject. So we're going to use a mixture of burnt umber and a bit of Prussian blue using the oil paint to sketch out the contours. As you can see here, I'm also adding a bit of information about the values. Once we've got our initial composition planned out, we can start applying the colors that we see, or the local color, right on top of our underpainting. We'll start with a mixture of cadmium red hue and alizarin crimson. Now we're going to be completing this painting in one sitting, meaning that I'm not stopping and allowing the layers of paint to dry before applying the next application. So this means that some of our underpainting is going to mix in with the colors that we apply on top, and you can see that this is creating a nice dark version of the color. Now progressively we're going to get a little bit heavier with our applications, and we're also going to be working our way so that we're applying lighter values. As you can see here, I've added a bit of titanium white to the mixture, and I'm beginning the process of pulling out some of the highlights. Now I'm also considering the directional strokes that I make with the paintbrush. I'm paying special attention to the shapes of value, of course, but I'm also paying special attention to the direction that I pull the paintbrush as I'm making these strokes. I'm trying to make these strokes flow over the cross contours of the form of the piece of candy. Any little thing that you can do to add to the illusion of form is helpful, and brush strokes are an excellent way to help create the illusion of form beyond what the value and the color relationships do on their own. Because oil paint dries so slowly, we have the ability to gradually adjust the value relationships and the colors. As you can see here, I'm working back and forth, pushing the lighter and darker values. And in fact, I'm adding just a touch of cadmium yellow to the mix as well to add some hints of some orange. Now, of course, this piece of candy is neatly wrapped within a wrapper, and you may notice that we're not painting any of the details of the wrapper at this point. It's easy for beginners to get overwhelmed with all the details and not think about the approach or the order that you approach a painting in. In this case, because we're working with an opaque medium like oil paint, we can start by applying the colors on the actual piece of candy first, and then over the top we'll develop the details for the wrapper. Now at this point we're ready to turn our attention to painting the base color for the wrapper, and it might be surprising that we're going to mix up a gray color to do so. So what we'll do is we'll use our mixture of Prussian blue and burnt umber and add just a bit of titanium white to it to produce a nice gray. Now if you want your gray to be a bit cooler, you can add a bit of a heavier mixture of the Prussian blue, or if you want it to be a bit warmer, you can add a bit more of the burnt umber to the mix. And then, just as we did with the piece of candy, we'll begin the process of altering the values. We'll start in this case by addressing the darker tones and values. So we'll just allow our mixture to be a little bit more heavily concentrated with the mixture of burnt umber and Prussian blue. In this case, our grays are a little bit warmer. We'll also address the cast shadow underneath the candy as well at this point. Now, of course, the way that we understand the form of the wrapper and the light and the way it behaves on the wrapper is through the relationships of the values that we create. And each one of these values has a specific shape. So what we'll do is we'll try to mimic the shapes of tone and value that we see on the subject and include them in the painting. This doesn't have to be perfect, and there's no way that you'll be able to match what you see exactly. But remember, after all, you're creating an illusion. So we'll continue to push the light and dark values until we have relationships that make sense within our painting. With shiny or highly reflective surfaces, you'll also notice that there's high levels of contrast and value, meaning that we'll often find dark values right next to light values, instead of seeing a gradation or a slow change from dark to light. Shiny or reflective surfaces often reflect the colors around them as well. For this reason, we'll add touches of yellow here and there using just a bit of yellow ochre. We'll also not be timid with the strong highlights that exist. Often it's these highlights that lead to the illusion of the highly reflective surface. We'll work slowly with a smaller brush to address the details of the cellophane over the top of the candy. For the most part, these details are addressed by adding highlights. Of course, we'll consider the directional strokes that are made with the brush as well, as they should flow with the direction of each wrinkle that exists in the cellophane. There's also areas where we have intense highlights. In this case, there's a strong collection of highlights in the upper right-hand corner of the piece of candy. Highlights on the wrapper manifest mostly in areas that are raised, so any wrinkle that protrudes out will likely catch some light and reflect it back in the form of a highlight. Since the paint is still wet, some of the highlights that we add will undoubtedly pick up some of the reds underneath and spread them across the surface. This will do nothing but add to the realism of the image, since the cellophane itself will reflect some of the colors around it. We'll continue to increase the contrast and value and build up the intensity of the highlights by adding additional applications of the white. By increasing the contrast, we further the illusion of form and also the light within the scene. We'll continue to work on the highlights and shadows that exist on the lower portion of the wrapper. Again, this is simply a process of recognizing the shapes of value that we see on our subject and trying to mimic them as closely as possible in the painting. We can recognize that creating an exact copy is nearly impossible, but as long as we get close to what we're seeing in our painting, then an accurate illusion can be created. Now with our piece of candy in place, we can start addressing the background. For this painting, I'm choosing to add a blue background, since it will create a nice color relationship with the reds and yellows in our piece of candy. Although the yellows are subtle, the combination of the red and blue will help to pull them out. This of course creates a primary color scheme, which is a color triad. These three colors are equidistant from each other on the color wheel. This blue is created by mixing titanium white with French ultramarine. We can apply our blue mixture around the entire portion of the candy, addressing all of the edges. We can even go over the top of the shadowed area, which is still wet. The darker color mixed for the cast shadow will naturally mix with the blue applications, creating a more natural looking cast shadow. We can also work the edges and create a nice smooth gradation from dark to light. Now of course, some of the surface color will show through the candy cellophane in areas. So we'll go back with a smaller brush and add a few hints of blue in different areas within the cellophane. Adding these bits of blue, of course, leads to a more natural and realistic painting. When we view objects in reality, we seldom see a strongly defined, crisp edge. In most cases, the edge is slightly blurred, so using a clean brush will go around the edges of the candy to create a more blurred edge around the cellophane. Then we can clean up the shape of the shadows a bit with a bit more of our light blue. And lighten it up in areas to create additional contrast if needed. And now, our painting of a piece of candy with oil paints is complete.
If you're ready to learn more about drawing and painting, then check out our comprehensive membership program, which includes video courses, weekly live lessons, ebooks, lesson plans for teachers, and much, much more. To learn more about our program, just click on the card in the upper right-hand corner or visit thevirtualinstructor.com/members today. And if you'd like to check out 3 of our course modules for free, you can do so by joining our mailing list. Just click on the link you see here on your screen. You'll get access to 3 of our course modules, which includes videos and ebooks, and of course you'll get updates when new lessons are posted on the website. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching.